Hi everyone. Today we're going to be discussing Boleos, and I'm going to give you a few simple exercises for you to do on your own to develop an awareness of how to do a Boleo correctly, as well as how to stay balanced and the different options that the Boleos have in terms of how they look. Before we begin working on Boleos, let's revisit the idea of pivoting in Tango. And in order to pivot correctly in Tango, we need to have what's called dissociation. I'm assuming that you're familiar with dissociation, and if you're not, check out my other tutorial on dissociation, part 1 and part 2, that allows you to really study the in-depth principles of dissociation. But just to start here, very simply, as you're in place, being on one foot, you can be in your heels or you can be wearing socks. Just make sure that you have the ability to pivot on the floor. What you want to do, being on one foot, is try dissociate to one side and pivot, and then turn the other way. What I'm doing here is I'm making sure that I first turn my upper body. So I first go with my upper body until I feel a limit across my core, and then that's the limit, as if I charged a rubber band. That's the limit that's going to bring around my hips. And then I do it to the opposite side. So doing this a few times, staying balanced, so making sure you're not losing your axis. If you've pivoted and you're feeling like you're kind of wobbling, that means something in your alignment is letting go. Sometimes it's the hip. We tend to kind of collapse in the hip. Sometimes we tilt the chest back and forth, so that will kind of prevent us from being balanced. So try this just to get yourself warmed up and feel that you're able to dissociate one way, turn, dissociate the other, and then try the other foot. So here I'm on my right foot. I'm going to turn to the right and to the left, making sure that I'm not turning in one piece, right? This is me, one piece pushing off the ground. That's different. Here, I'm going to make sure I turn first in my upper body, then my lower body follows. So then, once you've kind of gotten the feeling of this, go ahead and put in some side steps. So go side to side, and as I'm going side to side, I begin already the dissociation, pretending my partner is right here in front of me. And so as I dissociate here, I feel that I'm creating a limit across my front, and that will begin my feeling of the pivot. And then I pivot back. And then I take a side step. I'm dissociating slightly to the side here because my partner is here, creating a limit across my front, and then pivot and pivot. Side, pivot, and pivot. So I want you to feel these two distinct parts. That first I took a side, then I pivot my upper body, my lower body follows, then I pivot back. And so doing this a few times. Side, pivot, and pivot. Side, pivot, and pivot. Now, as you're doing your pivots, think about this. What if I were to begin my pivot here, and my lower body begins to follow, but then as I'm pivoting, I change my mind and I pivot back. The pivoting back, if you notice, my leg kind of lagged behind and snapped behind me. That's the Boleo. So the Boleo happens in this moment where I'm in the process of pivoting one way, but then my leader is going to reverse the direction. And because he's reversing my direction in the middle of my pivot, and because my upper body dissociates from my lower body, this effect happens, that my leg rebounds behind me. So this is what you will practice. Side, pivot, and then pivot again. So you want to catch that moment when you feel in your body that you've sent your upper body, then your lower body follows, and as your lower body is going, the upper body reverses direction. The Boleo really happens in your core. So I will feel the rebound in my core first. The leg is a result. So if you were to really slow it down, if you were to think about it conceptually, you want to feel first turn and feel the tension that builds up across your front. Then you begin to turn and the leg follows last. So the leg is not the most important part of the ballet. The leg is going to be the result of what happens in your upper body. So, practicing side, pivot, pivot. So it's a little faster. At first I was going pivot, pause, pivot, pause. So I was really staying. Here, I'm going to go side, pivot, and before I finish the pivot, I pivot back. Side, begin the pivot, and then reverse it. You'll notice I'm doing this without any support. Of course you can use a wall or a chair, but it's really nice to train your body to do this without any support, because then you really know the technique. If we're using a wall or if we're holding onto a chair, then a lot of times we end up pulling our body with the chair and we don't really get the sensation that we need for the boleos in our core. So once you have this technique with the foot staying on the floor, you can practice reversing the pivot and letting the leg kick. So doing a high boleo. So you might do a low boleo once, and then side and another low boleo, and then see if you can do a high boleo. So here I begin my pivot, and then as I pivot back, bah, I let the leg kind of snap behind me. Now if you're having a really hard time with balance, stay with the low boleo for now. Just go ahead, side step, boleo, boleo, side step, boleo, boleo. Okay? So you can put some music on, just one song, and go ahead and try doing a few low boleos, and then maybe a few high boleos. What happens with high boleos a lot is we distort our axis somewhat. So watch out for something like this to happen. So if you were to see me doing it in the front, if I were to do a boleo here, and then if I distort my alignment and I let my hip dip, then my axis will be disturbed. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your posture the whole time. I'm watching that I'm just turning around my spine. I'm not distorting my spine this way or that way. So this completes the quick introduction to boleos. If you want a more in-depth look at boleos and the technique and the mechanics, check out some of my other tutorials that I will be posting, or join me in my class. And if you have specific questions, anything that you feel is unclear, any personal questions that you need answered, go ahead and post a comment, and I'll try to get to them. Thanks for joining me.